Philip struggled to get up on the mountain. He had been tasked to plant a satellite device on top of the mountain, but got a lot more than he bargained for. When reaching the top, he stares right at an abandoned plane. He realizes that this had to be here for decades. How could something so big go unnoticed for so long? He had to know what this plane was hiding inside, but he should have just left it alone. Philip struggled with the decision if he should enter all by himself or not. He did not see a safe way inside of the plane. If he would get hurt, no one would notice that he was gone. The temperatures were dropping fast and Philip couldn't feel his hands anymore from the cold. He had to get help. This was too big for Philip to research on his own, so he signaled two of his colleagues with a flare gun, and they flew over by helicopter immediately. No one had ever seen anything like this before, and together they decided to try and get inside the plane. But no one was prepared for what they were about to see. Philip was the first person who stepped inside the plane. His mouth fell open instantly. How is it possible that no one knew about this? Philip and his colleagues look at each other in disbelief. This will make them famous. But what do they find inside the plane that is so important? Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. He had left behind his friends and family for this mysterious project and traveled to an unknown country. Someone from the town had sent him that letter for a reason. He was determined to uncover the truth. Philip arrived in a deserted town days after receiving the letter. The streets were empty, with only one supermarket. He began knocking on doors, asking about the urban legend. The townspeople, however, were not welcoming. Eventually, he met an old man who led him to a cafe called the Old Horse. At the cafe, the old man shared the legend. A plane, number 66, vanished after takeoff, leaving no trace. While some speculated about a storm, scientists dismissed it. To this day, the plane's fate remained a mystery. Before Philip could ask more, the man left abruptly, leaving Philip to figure things out alone. Determined, Philip traced possible routes the plane could have taken. Starting at the Alaskan airport, he searched for clues but found no one who knew about Plane 66. Frustrated, he returned to his accommodation, where he discovered a mysterious note on his door. The handwriting matched the original letter. It contained only one cryptic sentence, pushing him to continue his journey. Philip packed his bag and headed through the ghostly town. Reaching a mountain path marked restricted area, no trespassing, he pressed on despite the warning. The path was treacherous, with loose stones and icy patches. After a challenging hike, he spotted a small cottage in the distance, believing it to be Theo's place. A storm loomed, forcing him to hurry. At the cottage, Philip banged on the door until it opened. A small man stood silently in the doorway, as if expecting him. The man pointed to a bed where another note lay. Philip, feeling like he was on a scavenger hunt, wondered why this person hadn't pursued the mystery themselves. The note contained coordinates leading to the presumed location of the plane. The next day, Philip followed the coordinates, navigating snowy, unmarked terrain. He eventually spotted something unnatural on a distant mountain. Squinting, he recognized the outline of a wing. It was the plane, but there was no clear path to it, and reaching the site required venturing off-road through deep snow. As darkness crept in, Philip continued, determined to uncover the truth. Philip was only halfway to the plane when the sun began to set. Spotting a flat area suitable for setting up his tent, he hurried to reach it before dark. He managed to set up camp, but the increasing wind made it hard to stay warm. Curling into his sleeping bag, he struggled through the cold night. By morning, his hands were frozen, and his beard had collected icicles. Luckily, the sun was shining, and after warming up briefly outside, he packed his gear and resumed his journey. He was close now. When Philip finally reached the plane, he was stunned. It was almost entirely buried under the snow, with only the wing visible. Realizing the enormity of the task ahead, he mapped the location and made his way back to Theo's cabin to call for help. Philip contacted two trusted friends and fellow researchers, Lincoln and Greg. Although surprised to hear Philip was in Alaska, they didn't hesitate to join him. They knew that whatever he had found must be extraordinary. 3 days later, the trio gathered at Theo's cabin, their base for supplies and equipment. Philip led Lincoln and Greg to the plane. They were astonished by what they saw. an almost intact plane buried in snow. For days, they worked tirelessly to dig it out. The main body was still intact, with only a side wing and the back tail missing. The sides showed no signs of damage, making it all the more puzzling. The group realized accessing the plane wouldn't be easy. The windows were taped shut with black tape, raising suspicions. Philip theorized that something or someone important was inside. They needed a new plan to get in. Lincoln suggested drilling into the door, but Philip's attention was drawn to something sticking out of the tail. It was a small orange device. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the plane's black box. Excited, he retrieved it, knowing it could hold the key to the plane's mysterious disappearance. Opening the black box, however, revealed another mystery. The memory card, essential for deciphering the crash, was missing. Its slot was empty, leaving Philip to wonder if someone had removed it or if it was never there in the first place. The discovery left more questions than answers, intensifying the enigma surrounding the plane. Philip suddenly remembers the anonymous letters he had received. What if this person had taken out the memory card, and they only needed Philip to open up the plane so they could swoop in and steal everything that hid inside? He shakes his head and tells himself to get it together. But the thought stays in the back of his mind. Philip had never told Lincoln and Greg about the anonymous letters, and he didn't intend to do so until one of them asked about it. They wondered how Philip knew about this plane and why no one from the authority was helping him. But when he explained what had happened, Lincoln and Greg reacted differently than he expected. What was the worst thing that could happen? They got scared when they discovered what was happening and suddenly didn't want to continue their work. So Philip reminded them about the thrill and adventure they were having. Philip convinced them to continue the research, so they started drilling the next day. It was a bigger job than they anticipated, but they got through the plane's exterior after a while. But the hole wasn't big enough for any of them to crawl through. Eventually, the hole was big enough, and Philip stepped inside the plane. He ripped the tape from the first few windows. The natural light beamed over the inside of the plane, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The plane was filled with crates, but that wasn't the only thing he saw. Something in the corner of the plane glistened in the sunlight. Philip walked toward it and picked it up. It looked like a bullet, but it was all flattened by something. Philip's friends followed him inside and looked around with open mouths. They were too stunned to speak. Philip showed them the bullet, and they decided to check the cockpit together. They opened the door, expecting to see something horrible, but they were met with something they couldn't explain. The cockpit was empty. There were no bodies or other signs that there had been two people in there flying the plane. While Philip stayed in the cockpit to look around, Greg ran back to the cottage and grabbed a crowbar to open the crates. But when he opened the crates, he couldn't believe his eyes. He called for Philip and he rushed to Greg. Together, they unloaded the crates, but Lincoln was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, they heard a helicopter flying over their heads. Not long after that, Lincoln ran inside and yelled that the police were coming, and it didn't look good. Philip could hear the sirens from afar, and the roars of the snow scooters came closer every minute. Philip tried to think of an explanation. The police arrived within a few minutes, and they surrounded the plane. Philip, Lincoln, and Greg walked out of the plane with their hands up in the air. They were taken to the police station and questioned one by one. Philip was the last one, and he could finally show the police officers the letters. They were confused as to why he had never called the police, but he explained that he was a researcher and wanted to discover it independently. Philip, Lincoln, and Greg helped the police with the case and got an honorary medal for finding the plane. But it wasn't finished yet. There was one more person that needed to be found: the anonymous tipper. The police promised Philip to find this person, but it turned out to be harder than they thought. Philip and his friends flew home, and they wrote a book about their adventure. The book became a bestseller, and everyone wondered about this anonymous tipper. But it turned out that this person was never found, and no one will ever know why they did what they did. Tell us what you think about this story and share it with your friends. It might inspire them and brighten their day.